Hey everybody, thank you very much for attending the webinar we're running today, Supercharge Your Development with the Strengths Approach and your people's development too. My name is Dr. Paul Brewerton, Managing Director of Strengthscope, and I am joined by my colleague who will now introduce himself.
Hi everyone. Hi Paul. Welcome everybody. Welcome on board. Looking forward to this next punchy 20-30 minutes together. I see there's quite a lot of you online at the moment. Good to see some familiar LRMG names on the board. So thanks for that. And then also some newbies who we hopefully will engage with through this conversation. So yeah, so thanks for that, Paul. I think the idea of supercharging and the development of people through this comes down to really the reason for our partnership. I was flying through to the UK in November 2017 with a challenge on the brain and on the heart, which was about restructuring our own organization and needing to merge 4 business units and get people into the right seats. And I was fortunate enough then to meet yourself, Paul, in the UK and get introduced to the strengths-based approach and Strengthscope and what you guys were doing. And it was a light bulb moment, certainly for myself, and to the conundrum, the challenge of how do we get people into the right seats, into the right roles, and get them to high performance and to get to that peak performance position. So it is a wonderful connection, and I think it was divine intervention. I must be quite honest. And what it helped me do was restructure our teams based on not just their skill sets acquired over time, but their strength profiles. So we strength profiled everyone, we matched, we looked at teams, we looked at productivity habits and how we could line up. And the team on the 1st of March 2018 all took on a new job, new role, new seats, using strengths and skills, and aligned everybody to goals. And what that had was a marked effect, not only on the building trust and the camaraderie of the team, but was connected to the way in which they fundamentally showed up as a team and showed up as a new team. And we saw 120% growth that first year. Same people, just at a productivity level, re-engaged and playing to their strengths, because like some of the research shows, we were probably only using 12 to 15% of people's strengths before Strengthscope. And today we're probably playing to about 60 to 70% of their strengths. So that's a marked difference. And I think when you look at the passion statements and our purpose as organizations, which is really bringing about the best in people, positively shaping their lives, that's really where the connection happened for us, Paul. And I think that was part of the magic of our partnership. So wanted to share that little story as an anecdote. But I think if we slip forward one slide to this picture. So I think the data bears out today why most organizations are struggling to supercharge their people and their people development, and particularly getting the right seats in place. Most individuals, no matter what your generational level might be, are asking themselves these 3 questions. They are starting with, do I belong here, and why do I belong here? And they often are validating their belonging to, can I grow here? And can I learn here? And is my contribution being felt, and can I make a contribution and impact here? So this really represents the story of how we at LRMG, along with our partnership with Strengthscope, can ignite people into their own personal growth, but also their connection back to the organization. So to be fair, Strengthscope is seen as a means of analyzing and looking at your strength profiles, but in actual fact, it's a beautiful tool to use to establish the groundwork for how culture and how people see the organization and how they feel about the organization and how they connect with that organization. So it's been wonderful for us to play out this own business model, this golden circle, using the partnership certainly with Strengthscope and making it come alive for individuals. And what we are finding today is individuals that show up with really good relational skills, or relational strengths, or show up with really good emotive strengths and are people orientated, often connect really well with other individuals within an environment where they didn't know they had those strengths. And so it's really awakening, and the self-awareness has played as an area for us to certainly see this show about. So Paul, that's just in a nutshell, and to the guys online, that's in a nutshell how we've seen the StrengthScope journey for ourselves play out. And what we've seen with our clients is, most organizations are struggling today with two key challenges. One, how do I use the talents of my people, and what is the people balance sheet look like in my organization? What do I actually have in this asset base that people and organizations talk about quite often? My assets are my people. What is my asset base? What's my people balance sheet? And the second one is the one of the data saying again that people are leaving organizations, and through the exit interviews recording that they don't see a future and a career here at this organization, and wish to go to greener pastures to go and evolve and play out their talents in a different place. And that's shocking for organizations to be missing the opportunity to use those talents. So Paul, that's really where we want to mission and focus, and to everyone online, it's the idea that if we use people's talents in the right way for the right reason, linked to their skills and align them to goals, they can hit that peak performance markers. So just a bit of that intro and our game plan together, and what we're seeing in the short term is significant change.
Irwin, thank you so much for that. Great intro. And really, for me, I echo everything that you said in terms of the connection, the serendipity of that, where we had got to both of our organizations on separate paths, but very much, relating to the same territory, just with slightly different language, and then the coming together to make a difference using the strengths approach. So what I'd like to do, again, thank you, Irwin. I would like to take everybody through a few thoughts, ideas, a bit of background more towards strengths. Irwin was talking there a little bit about StrengthScope in terms of the different clusters that we have within the tool. So I just want to touch a little bit on the tool itself, but primarily I want to talk about the practical application, and move on to discuss a case study with you where there are some lessons that we learned as well. So yeah, it's quite a lot to get through, but we'll do it pretty quickly. What we often do when we are introducing people to the strengths approach is we run an activity. Now, this is a gift to everybody listening today, and everybody seeing this later as well, those who couldn't make it onto the webinar today. It's an activity that enables people to start keying into the strengths approach pretty quickly. So all you need to do, you can do this, not now, but you can do this in pairs. You can do this with a room full of 10 people, a team. You can do it with a room full of 1,000 people. Well, what you do is you ask people to think about a time when you were at your very best at work. And then you ask, what were you doing? How did it feel? And you just need to talk to somebody about this. Tends to be sort of 2-3 minutes each way. It can be a little bit more than that if you want to. It gets people up, it gets people talking, but more importantly than that, it gets people enthusing about what it was that got them into that flow moment where they were at their very best. And that's what's exciting about this approach. It's very much based on the principles of positive psychology. It's strong in terms of its science base. And what happens always with this as an activity is that people start off a little bit quieter, and then the momentum and the volume will start to build as people get into their flow and they start to describe what they really love about work in a variety of different ways. And the person who's listening to those stories then can feed back. Did you know that you were coming alive at that point? Your body language changed, you opened up. And it's fascinating to see it. It's fascinating to hear it, and it's really a motivating thing. But that's not enough. This motivation that you're hearing in the room needs to be channeled in some way. So what I'm saying is that this activity keys into the principles of positive psychology. That's focusing on what is good, what works, what's enjoyable, what comes naturally for people. But the trick is to turn that natural power and energy into meaningful results at work. So harnessing, channeling that into ways that will make a difference to ultimately people's well-being, but also to their performance at individual, at team, and ultimately at enterprise levels. And to do that well, we've spent the last 13 years developing an approach which can enable organizations to take that on board, start small because everybody wants to pilot, and that's right, and then start to roll out into the wider organization. So we operationalize those positive psychology principles into the strengths approach, which you can see here on the slide. We define strengths as underlying qualities that energize you, and you'll have heard that in my description of the activity. So you're looking for people's energy, you're looking to harness that energy, and that you are great at, or that you have the potential to become great at. So there's something here about, not necessarily skill level, but something that you'll have developed over time in terms of those things that you do well. Or it may be that you're early on that journey in terms of skill development and you have potential to achieve more than you have up to this point. So why the focus on strengths? Well, the vast majority of people spend their time-limited development focused on weaknesses, and they spend little time working to build on and optimize their strengths. But the research shows that more successful people do the opposite. They stretch their strengths, they develop skills and effectiveness and agility in the areas of strength that they have, rather than focusing exclusively on weakness. So to get the best from ourselves, we need to use strengths and knowledge and experience in the most productive way possible to reduce performance risks. And that then needs to be aligned with the context in which you're operating. So the organization's goals. Where you have those three things coalescing, you are much more likely to achieve peak performance, sustainable high performance, and to continue with that, utilizing and channeling that energy in ways that were less possible before. So here we have some examples of results from a large study that was done just to show the outcomes, the output that can happen when you adopt this strengths approach across an organization. So this is a study of 1.2 million employees, 22 organizations, 45 countries, actually undertaken by the market research US organization Gallup. And it shows that 90% of organizations using the strengths approach reported increased sales, profit, customer engagement, in turnover, as well in terms of employees, and a significant increase in engagement. What you can see on the right is what Irwin was describing as our core model in his introduction. This is the StrengthScope tool, it's the StrengthScope profile, it's the wheel as we call it. And what this shows is the uniqueness of every individual. It shows that everybody is entirely unique in the strengths that they bring, in their highs and in their lows. You can see it's divided into 4 clusters: emotional, relational, thinking, and execution. And then there are 24 strengths across the entire model. The significant 7, as we call them, appear in purple, and in blue you see the remainders, and there may well be some that are bubbling under strengths, as we call them, that almost make it into that top group. There'll be some that are lower as well, and they may represent draining areas for people. I believe that we're looking, yes we are, just checking, at my profile. So I can speak here from the heart in terms of what we see and what I own. So collaboration is a really significant energizer for me. This is just one example of that. The relationship, the partnership with LRMG between our LRMG and Strengthscope is another larger example. So myself and Irwin having this conversation today, and a variety of different collaborative approaches and projects that we have and that I have the world over. It's a huge part of who I am, and I want to do justice to that every day. So it's not just a strength, it's also something that's underpinned by a value. You can see elsewhere on my profile, if you can read it, that efficiency is much lower for me. So I find planning and then delivery against planning, because that's results focused, much less energizing. In fact, if that's my role, I may well feel drained by it over time. That doesn't excuse me. I need to deal with those qualities being where they are on my profile, but I'll probably better do that by drawing on strengths than I will by over focusing on learning how to deal with my efficiency and results focused drainers head on. So people say to me that they don't experience me as inefficient or that I don't get things done. They say it's amazing the results that you achieve, and you're always on time and organized, and you seem to have a really structured life. Well, the reason for that, as you can probably see from my profile, is that I want to deliver for other people. I want to make sure that I do justice to my relationships and to the people in my business and to all those people around the world who are whose lives are being touched by this approach. And so that's where I get my energy from. That's what enables me to plan well and effectively and to get things delivered. It's not the having of a strength around efficiency or results focus. So that shows in a nutshell how this approach actually works. We have a whole raft of data that we've collated over time as well. So what we find with the Strengthscope profile, and you can see the uniqueness just in my profile, clearly if you're looking at anyone else's, it will look significantly different. There'll be higher highs, lower lows. Some people it's more clustered around the middle. Some people it's very spiky, if you like, a bit like mine, more kind of on and off. The chances of getting the same top 7 strengths in Strengthscope as anyone else are 1 in 1.3 billion, just statistically. So your profile is as unique as you. And for us, that's really important in terms of the message that the strengths approach brings. Strengths are uniquely yours. The way that you utilize and harness the energy that you have is uniquely up to you. It comes down to who you are, where you're from, what your value set is, and your context. And that, for us, is the beating heart of diversity. It's such an important message to get out to people. And it very much speaks to Generation Z, to the upcoming work generation and beyond, who expect that level of individuation of the employee experience. So this approach now is very much of its time. My former business partner and I, many years ago, used to joke that we probably started the business about 5 years too early because we had to wait for the world to catch up a bit. It definitely has. We're now in a place which is very different from where we started. The strengths approach is, yes, sorry, go on.
Paul, there's two little caveat points I want to make about the idea of the remedial approach to skills development, which is really weakness focused, and how that drains people to be talking about weakness and negative feedback, versus a strength approach, which says there are no weaknesses, there are low, as you mentioned, and high strength or significant strength areas. How that changes the context for the way people show up when they know they have this unique combination of things they can bring into their roles and into the organization, how that changes their whole orientation to success and the meaning of success, as opposed to what HR and L&D departments have been doing around trying to focus purely in on the weaknesses and the skills areas that need more development. And some of the study work I've been reading recently, we spend about 80% of our time defending our skills, putting energy into defending our skills and our way we show up, versus putting our energies into our strengths and the way we, can make a difference in the environment. And I thought you are right. It's really perfectly timed individuation, personalization, and knowing my uniqueness as an individual and how I could show up differently in the world of work and make a contribution unique to my, my profile specifically in an organization itself. So I wanted to just add those in there because that's been significant for us to see, not just in our own organization, but in the clients and organizations we're working with today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Irwin. That's really helpful to add. Okay, so I'm just going to move on now to talk about the case study I mentioned. There's many we could have picked from here. What I wanted to do was to share with everyone here today and everyone who listens later, kind of lessons learned in a sense, in that this is the methodology that we would recommend post-pilot, because in every organization, as I mentioned, and any organization wanting to consider the adoption, even at a tactical level, of a new approach that is a little bit counterintuitive, although it makes sense, is actually quite a different approach to take in many organizations, and we recognize that. Once pilot is complete and the data is in and decisions are made, actually we want to go ahead and engage the organization on this journey. This example I want to share with you does speak to the kind of almost the best practice approach that we would be recommending. There's not a lot of people who would know this. There's not a lot of people working in this world, or haven't been on this journey for quite as long as we have. There are some, but not many. So I just wanted to kind of give you the high points, really, in terms of, not high points, just all the points, in terms of the route map that we've developed over many years. So this was an international company wanting to introduce the strengths approach. They had piloted, they could see the fit. It's very similar, actually, but very different from what Owen was talking about as regards his own company. In that they recognized that there was a different approach they felt could really benefit their people. And that was the reason that they decided that they wanted to adopt these principles internally and also be able to talk about these principles to their own clients, which is, I think, resonant with the LRMG story as well. So we worked with, in this case, the HR and the talent development team across the UK and Europe as well. And that's now kind of rolling a little bit further to create a route map for introducing the strengths-based approach across the talent lifecycle, across the employee experience. And the discrete stages we covered were, to begin with, engaging the executive team, which we found really important to determine the measures of success that the organization would be comfortable assessing themselves against, and almost as importantly, to ensure the full and the vocal support from the top of the organization. So engaging the exec team we found so powerful. You can't always do it. If you can, I would recommend it, absolutely. Next step was designing and delivering 2 development pathways for employees and for managers to give a common language and the knowledge and skills required for discussing day-to-day performance and future career development in the strengths way. So ensuring people had almost like a light touch entry point way that they could start these conversations happening, to understand their profiles, to understand the principles, and to understand the practice of how this was going to shift, because we're talking tweaks here, the way that their people development processes would work. The sea change shift is that wind in the sails that Irwin was talking about. It's actually starting to change the lens that people use in order to see individual employees within the organization. The next point I've made here is weaving strengths into every day. What I mean by that is now tweaking those HR processes, those people processes, and weaving in strengths language and philosophy into, for example, appraisal and career conversations, which was very much the aim of this as a project for the organization. They had an opportunity to upgrade their performance management process. That's where they started their journey. Alongside this, we also upskilled the HR, the talent team, and managers as well, so that everybody within the organization had the tools that they could use, the understanding that they needed to be able to have these conversations. And we developed e-content for the people who missed the initial development journey. So those development pathways couldn't cover everybody. So we then developed e-content alongside that to ensure that people coming in later still had access and understanding the same as those who had experienced the kind of group sessions at the beginning. The organization then took up team development as a separate kind of almost tactical area that they wanted to address using the strengths approach, which is another different skill set entirely, and also individual coaching where necessary along the strengths guidelines for execs. And then by the time we got to the end of year one, we were at a place where we could look back, assess, and then look forward and refresh that roadmap that we developed in the first time round. So the outcomes, in short, have been as follows. For this organization, the pitch win rate has risen to 70%, which is a significant increase. Staff churn has fallen to 20%, which is incredibly dropped incredibly, and it was an issue for them. Retention, engagement were big issues for them in a very, very competitive employee landscape or recruitment landscape. And the company won Agency of the Year, and the judging panel cited their organizational culture as a major factor in their decision. So it's a good story, success story, but I wanted to take you through that linear approach that we took in order to share with you what we would see as the kind of core principles of the success of this as an approach.
Paul, can I share one quick one? So that's a beautiful connection to the use of StrengthScope, but we've just recently been working with an organization who wishes to move from quite a product-centric business strategy to a customer-centric retailization business strategy. And it seemed on paper quite an easy transition, change a few target operating models, restructure the how we show up in the business, etc. And I asked the executive of the business CEO, in actual fact, how certain is he that the organizational culture will support the retailization and customer-centric approach going forward? And he said, I'm not sure what your question is. I don't understand what you mean. I said, does your organization have the muscle and the strengths to deliver on a customer-centric strategy? Which meant, do they have strong relational and emotional skills, which shows up in our people external approach and engagement levels, etc. And he said, I wasn't sure. And we just took a view of 150 of their senior leaders as a bit of a pilot approach, which gave the result that paused their eagerness to quickly cut over to a retail customer-centric model, because the executive team themselves only showed up with their cluster on relational being at about 12 or 13%, which meant that the organization at a senior level in the organization didn't have a natural strength in the areas of building relations and, persuading people and emotive levels of engagement and empathy and compassion, which is critical for a retail organization to have. So it created also a nice blueprint or a mask around how they might transition to build out those strengths, hire in the right people or bring the right people to those key roles that would be customer facing, because, fundamentally they needed to rewire the leadership structure and strategy to put people also into different roles that would help them deliver on the target operating model for retailization. It's another way of using it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Owen. That's a fantastic example. Very, very practical, very, very commercially business focused, and demonstrates how this approach can shine a light on strategic direction, actually, as you said, and helping the organization from the top make better choices about the way that they may choose to go at that point in time. Because, frankly, if you've got those particular strengths, or you have those challenges within the organization, you have to take a different approach to, if they're there in plenty, and kind of the rest of the organization needs to catch up, as you've rightly said. So I think that's fab. Thank you. We're very conscious of time. We haven't got very long left for this now. So there's some examples, really, I guess, of what I was saying earlier, that the time has come for the strengths approach. There are many, many more organizations than these who are using the approach now. This is primarily UK and Europe, but it's absolutely a global phenomenon and a global wave that is building. Very briefly, some more results that we've documented over the course of the last few years. Average 65% increase in the effectiveness of leadership teams over 16 months, 70% increase in graduate applications, within 6 months retention rate improving to 81%, in that case an increase of 14%, turnover from 10 to 1.7% over 18 months, retention rate to 94%, saving approximately $1 million US, and that was a US example over 18 months. So yeah, really pleased with what we're seeing in terms of the business impact, and I think that speaks to both of our examples. So Irwin, I'd like to pass back to you for a few closing words, and I think we'll finish, and this will be the end of the webinar today.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone for being online. I think a nice summary at the end there of knowing and being able to find the right people in your organization who aren't playing to strengths today, into and shifting them into new roles, helping them build some buoyancy around the way in which they show up in their uniqueness, helping them play to those strengths and ultimately outperform their competitors. I honestly believe that when you listen to the data and the stats around the kinds of improvement and impact that we've seen ourselves in our own organization, we're seeing with our clients and the leadership teams, is that there's nothing in an organization today that can shift the needle on performance like the strengths-based approach. And I'd like to encourage those online and certainly those that have practiced with it to evangelize and share that message and help us build a strengths-based economy, one that's focused on playing to strengths than to remedial practices that drives down weaknesses. And I love what it's done for my own career and also for the individuals in my organization, but certainly where the Strengthscope team is going and continuing helping us sharpen our blade in this process of performing to our peak and becoming enlightened about ourselves as individuals. So Paul, thanks to you and your team for coming into our lives and our world, and then for bringing such practical ways for us to compete in this VUCA world today. So thank you to all online.
Thanks, Irwin. Appreciate the invite, and yeah, always good to talk about Strengths Approach.
Cheers all. Thank you.
Thank you.